Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Paul. Hope you're having an amazing day. In this video, we're going to be talking about rumours for the PlayStation 6 Handheld, because we're officially at this stage now of this current generation of consoles where rumours for the next generation are starting to come out pretty regularly. It's not too surprising because, of course, this is historically what we've seen with previous generations of consoles, like when the PS4 Pro released about a year afterwards. There were already rumours of the PS5 and so on and so forth through history. And for Sony's next generation of consoles, it seems that they are going to have a dual console strategy. There will be the PlayStation 6 home console, which I don't really need to explain that. It's very similar to the PS5 or the PS4 and so on. You plug it into your TV, you're good to go. But they will also be developing a handheld system. Now, this is going to mean that there's going to be a very interesting ecosystem that Sony will be developing, because this console will be capable of running games natively. So it's not the PlayStation Portal, where of course you're streaming games from the cloud, but it's also not quite like the PlayStation Vita either, because allegedly this console is going to have the ability to run PS5 games natively, although perhaps not all titles, and we'll get to that in just a moment. Maybe its own bespoke titles and potentially some compatibility with the PS6. It's going to be very interesting. It seems that Sony are not adopting the same policies of Microsoft with the Xbox Series S and X, and they're of course also going a very different route from the Switch and Switch 2, which of course is more of a handheld device first, and then you can of course dock it. So I think Sony's approach here is really interesting, but enough talk, let's look at the specifications. There's a nice Reddit post which does go over a lot of this stuff and makes it pretty succinct to read, but there is also some information on Twitter as well that I'll be reading out. So all of this is courtesy of Kepler L2 on NeoGAF, but he also has an account on Twitter. So I'll start out with the memory stuff first. So it seems that it's going to be using LPDDR5X memory, 16 gigabytes. He also confirmed that this is 128-bit bus width, and this is going to mean that the system has around a third of the bandwidth of the PS5. Now this is augmented, however, because one, it has 4 megabytes of L2, so that's a similar CPU cache configuration to the PS5, but additionally we have 16 megabytes of MAL. I'm going to simplify the answer of what MAL is in this video, but I would encourage you guys to do some Googling and understand it from a more technical perspective, but I just want to get everyone onto the same page for the sake of this video. Think of MAL as basically like an additional layer of cache. So there are different levels of cache. When you have like L1, L2, L3, typically speaking, L1, for example, is smaller, L2 is larger, and so on. But L1 would be faster, L2 would be a little slower, and so on and so forth. Now, the whole purposes of these different levels and different cache configurations, typically what happens is data is evicted from one level of cache and then pushed to the to like a higher level of cache. So for example, data would be evicted from L1 to go to L2 and so on and so forth. In the case of MAL, it's pretty large, 16 megabytes, which doesn't sound massive, and it's going to be interesting to see what Sony's strategy is for the PS6. I've heard that, and I have actually leaked previously, that I was being told that Sony do have a MAL for the PS6, and also I can't remember if I leaked it for the handheld, but I definitely leaked it for the PS6. Now I heard it was large. Now I don't know if 16 megabytes constitutes as large for the PS6. I was potentially told it was larger than this, but we'll have to wait and see. Regardless, what does matter is that this is basically going to be where you can have the GPU and the CPU work coherently on different projects, and this is going to be very important going forward for the next generation. So again, that is actually a pretty big win for Sony, and Sony do a lot of stuff with the, let's say, optimization around cache. Like, it's quite a big topic. Anyway. So the reason they've gone with LPDDR5 rather than 6 is just too far away. Now, as for the configuration of the of the GPU, it seems like it's using RDNA 5 minimum, or maybe RDNA 6. Technically speaking, RDNA 5 is now UDNA or Unified DNA. According to Kepler, he says that when he was asked, is it RDNA 5 or 6, is it a spin-off for the PS6 die, he said both are a fork of GFX 13, RDNA 5, UDNA, whatever AMD decides to call it. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if 1 or 2 features of RDNA 6 are incorporated in the PS6, but at the very minimum, it's going to be RDNA 5. The reason I say I wouldn't be surprised is because the release date for the PS6, at least unless there's slipping or, you know, something else, but the rumor is it's going to be late 2027, maybe 2028. RDNA 5 for the desktop launches next year in the second half, and RDNA 6 or UDNA 2, whatever you want to call it, is going to be 2 years after that, so that would be 2028. However, typically speaking, IPs for APUs and so on work on slightly different timelines. So I would say at minimum RDNA 5, but maybe potentially with some features of RDNA 6 thrown in. Sony did that with the PS4. They incorporated some of the features for a future IP for the base model to bump up the asynchronous compute engines and so on. However, just to be very clear, this is speculation. I've got told it by one source that they might do this, but they seemed kind of wishy-washy, but they did say at the very minimum it's RDNA 5. Regardless, what is important is Sony will also almost certainly customize this technology anyway, and it's very difficult to 100% one-to-one, let's say, a desktop IP with a console IP, because Sony will cut something out and then will incorporate this, and Microsoft do the same thing, of course. Allegedly, it's going to have some type of advanced AI upscaling. I wouldn't be surprised if this is the case. RDNA 5 is going to have quite a lot of improvements for this, and of course this is going to be part and parcel of what Sony and AMD are doing. Obviously, they've already announced their public cooperation with things like FSR and upscaling technologies, so I think that that's pretty obvious. Now, he also provided some information concerning the number of compute units and ROPs. So on NeoGAF, he was originally asked whether it has 36 compute units. This would put it on par with the PS5 in terms of the number, but he said no, it's fewer than that, but obviously you have the fact that this is a much later graphics IP, so it's doing considerably more work. Then someone else on Twitter was asking him pretty much the same thing, and he was basically in a thread, and he mentioned that it's a very similar configuration to Strix from AMD. That's one shader engine multiplied by 2 shader arrays, so that's 2 shader arrays multiplied by 4 workgroup processors. So to be clear here, each shader array features 4 workgroup processors, so you multiply 2 by 4, that gets you 8 workgroup processors, or 16 compute units and 32 ROPs. So Strix is RDNA 3.5, but to be clear, when he's saying that the configuration is similar to Strix, he doesn't mean the graphics IP. It's kind of like saying that the number of CPU cores is 8. Kind of similar to like the 9800X3D or something like that. It's basically just the number of cores, not their actual graphics IP or the features within the GPU itself. It'll also be very interesting to see how clock frequencies play out. There is also a rumor from Tom, Moore's Law is dead. And I think someone else also was talking about this as well, but I'm not 100% certain. Where basically they were saying that developers on the PS5 will now have access to like a kind of a lower power mode. Of course, this is like a new feature. Now, theoretically, this will allow developers at least some way to more easily be able to get games working on the PS5. It's going to... Oh, sorry, I say the PS6 handheld. It's going to be very interesting, though, to see what Sony's strategy is. Now, if I had to make some speculation here, I think that the actual home console is going to have more memory. Again, 16 gigabytes of memory for the handheld. I wouldn't be surprised if the PS6 has somewhere around 24 gigabytes. Maybe a 256-bit bus will still be present, similar to the PS5, but I think that they're probably going to use higher density memory, and it's probably going to be GDDR7. And of course, they're also going to have a hell of a lot more performance. Allegedly, this PS6 handheld, the portable, is going to have around a 15 watt TDP, which is quite similar to what you would expect from like the Switch and so forth anyhow. But you don't need to worry about that with a console, you know, like a traditional home console. So I will be super interested to see what Sony's strategy is. If I'm very honest with you guys, I really wish Nintendo had gone this route with the new Switch. Obviously, they aren't, and their strategy is very successful for Nintendo. Look at the sales figures of the Switch, so, you know. But I really wish they had done that, because I just feel like, you know, I was just thinking back on the GameCube, for example, and just how awesome that system was. I think it would have been fantastic if we'd have seen, like, because obviously they've gone with Nvidia, it would have been awesome if they had like a Switch 2 similar system, but then also released a more powerful variant, again using Nvidia's architecture, and then you'd be able to play some games from the handheld and put it into the, you know, onto the home system. Let's just call it the SNES 2 for sake of argument. And of course, Nintendo even kind of did this back in the day as well. Do you remember like the Game Boy Player, I think, for the, was it for the GameCube? Did they also... Let me know in the comments, guys. Maybe my brain's just like a bit off today. I'm sure they had something like that for the SNES as well, where you could put in like Game Boy original games into like your SNES. Maybe I'm misremembering that. So if you're a Nintendo fan, let me know in the comments below, 'cause I might be wrong. With that said, take care of yourselves. Have an amazing day. Bye for now.